Death will come on swift wounds to him who disturbs the peace of the king. Spooky, right? If you found that carved on tablet inside a sealed Egyptian tomb, would you keep going? Break open the sarcophagus, poke around the skeletal remains, and haul the treasure out for everyone to gawk at? What would you think? Hang on. I'm literally standing at someone's grave. Maybe I should go. If I'm being honest, I'd go right in. Good job. If I'm Howard Carter in 1922, paid by a rich aristocrat to find a lost tomb, I'm not backing out due to a spooky inscription. I don't believe in curses, and I'm definitely opening the box. Today we're digging into one of the most famous alleged curses in history. The curse of King Tut. The curse of the pharaoh. Is it real? No, but the story around it is wild. Tangled up with media hype, mystery, and a lot of very normal, very human misfortune. So, let's dive into it. Welcome back to another episode of Dead Reckoning Shit. As always, I'm your host. We're going to explore the curse of King Tut together. And spoiler, we're going to find out it's not real. Its curses aren't real. Ancient Egypt was obsessed with the afterlife. If you were a pharaoh or a wealthy elite, your main life goal was to secure a good status and immortality after death. That meant elaborate burial rituals, mummification, spells, and funerary texts to guide you in being buried with items you thought you'd need on the other side. We're talking gold, jewels, furniture, cosmetics, board games, everything a dead king might want in an eternal man cave. From a modern perspective, you can imagine being the kid of a rich ancient Egyptian. When you die, I'll inherit all your stuff, right? Actually, I would be buried with all of it in a giant pyramid. Greedy, even in death. There's a practical point here, too. It's common courtesy not to break into tombs. Anyone doing it probably did feel a creeping guilt. At least until they remembered the paycheck. Over the centuries, mummies and alleged curses seeped into literature and entertainment. In the 19th century, you got works like The Mummy, A Tale of the 22nd Century, and Lost in a Pyramid, or The Mummy's Curse, which helps cement the idea that disturbing a tomb leads to supernatural payback. By the early 20th century, horror films like The Mummy and The Mummy's Tomb brought the image of reanimated bandaged corpses and deadly inscriptions to mainstream audiences. There was even a short film in 1912 about a cursed ring stolen from a tomb that punishes anyone who wears it till its return. Fast forward again, and you've got the big Hollywood Mummy franchise, spin-offs and theme park rides with high-speed dark roller coasters themed around ancient curses. The pop culture link between mummies, tombs, and curses is now so strong that if you see a lever in a tomb, you already know. Pull it, and spikes, beetles, or ghosts are coming for you. The modern mummy curse craze really ramps up after the discovery of the Rosetta Stone in 1799 and the cracking of hieroglyphics in 1822. Suddenly, Egyptologists can read what's on tomb walls, and yes, they find plenty of warnings. Egyptologist Zahi Hawass excavated a site at Column Abu Bilal, found an inscription that said, "All people who enter this tomb who will make evil against this tomb and destroy it, may the crocodile be against them in the water, snakes against them on the land. May the hippopotamus be against them in the water, the scorpion on land." Basically, ancient version of keep out or nature itself will wreck you. And there are many similar formulas. Anyone who will remove any stone or brick from my tomb, I will exterminate his survivor. Or anyone who will enter this tomb in impurity, I will wring his neck like a goose. On inscription, the penalty gets graphic. The power of a goddess will be against the offender forever. His sons won't inherit his place, and a donkey will. Let's just say things get anatomically unpleasant, both for him and his wife. You can tell the scribe was going for maximum shock value, but here's the key. These are moral and social ones, not evidence of real supernatural mechanisms. They're there to scare off tomb robbers in a society that really valued proper burial. The idea that they cause specific modern death decades later is where the myth runs ahead of the facts. And we get to the star of the show, King Tut, the Boy King. His tomb was discovered in 1922 by a team led by Egyptologist Howard Carter, funded by Lord Northern. Unlike many other royal tombs, Tut's was incredibly intact, hidden enough that earlier grave robbers had mostly missed it. Inside, they found more than 5,000 artifacts, golden sandals, a wooden throne covered in gold and inlaid with silver and semi-precious stones, elaborate wall paintings of gods, ivory cups, cosmetic jars, and even board games, presumably for afterlife downtime. At the center of it all, Tut's body wrapped in linen inside 3 nested coffins. The outer 2 were gilded wood set with stones. The innermost coffin was solid gold. Yes, an entire human-sized coffin made of gold. All 3 coffins showed Tut with the iconic long false beard, holding the crook and flail across his chest, symbols of kingship and the fertility of the land. His famous golden death mask sat directly on his mummy's head. The linen saturated in oils that had chemically reacted over time, almost gluing him in place. Early examinations had to be done with the mummy still stuck inside, and only in the mid-2000s was he moved into a climate-controlled glass case back in his tomb. The public reaction to the discovery was massive. The newspaper called it Tutmania, a combination of untouched treasure, a young pharaoh, and warnings about disturbing a king's rest was perfect fodder for sensational headlines. So where does the curse come in? In the years following the opening of the tomb, several people loosely associated with the excavation died or experienced misfortune. Some reports claim 8, some 11, some even more victims. Let's look at the main ones and what actually happened. So the most famous alleged victim is Lord Carnarvon, Fryer's patron. He was in poor health to begin with chronic lung problems. A few months after the tomb was opened, he died in Cairo from blood poisoning and pneumonia after nicking a mosquito bite on his cheek while shaving. The wound became infected and spiraled. Rumors quickly piled on that all the lights in Cairo went out at the moment of his death, that his dog, back in England, howled and died at the same instant. These details are perfect for newspapers, very weakly supported. Author Marie Corelli had written a warning about possible trap with poisons and sealed tombs. Her words, plus Carnarvon's death, presented as proof of a curse. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle even suggested that priests had summoned a malevolent spirit to protect the tomb. That made for great copy. But again, it's storytelling, not science. Carnarvon's half-brother Aubrey Herbert later had all his teeth removed in a bizarre attempt to treat his eye condition. He developed a fatal infection and died. Another half-brother, Mervyn Herbert, died of malarial pneumonia contracted while traveling in Albania. Both deaths are tragic and fairly typical of a pre-antibiotic world, but they are not remotely evidence of a tomb curse. Then we have Richard Bethel and his father. Richard Bethel, Carter's secretary, was found dead at London's Bath Club in 1929. His cause of death was given as coronary thrombosis. Speculation about murder, smothering, or poisoning surfaced later. Reliable sources point to a natural death. His father, distressed and seriously ill, died months later after jumping from a window. His newspapers framed Bethel's death under headlines like, "A curse recalled," but the timing, years after the discovery, and the medical details, don't support a supernatural pattern. One of the most colorful stories is that a cobra ate a canary belonging to an Egyptologist, sometimes said to be Carter. The cobra, a symbol of royal protection in Egyptian iconography, is imagined sitting smugly in a cage. It's a powerful image, the royal snake devouring an innocent bird, right as the tomb is disturbed. But beyond symbolism, it's just a snake eating a small animal. If it had happened at any other time, nobody would have written it down. Then we have Arthur Mace and George Gould. Arthur Mace is an archaeologist who helped clear the tomb and developed pneumonia, leaving Egypt after 2 seasons and dying later in a nursing home. George Gould, a wealthy American who visited the tomb, fell ill soon afterwards and died of pneumonia. These two are the closest candidates for a microbial explanation. Maybe they inhaled something from the sealed environment, but the evidence is sparse, and pneumonia was tragically common and often deadly at the time. One plausible scenario doesn't make an overarching curse real. Then, Hugh Evelyn White. Hugh was an archaeologist who worked in Egypt. Took his own life in 1924. It's often said he wrote, "I have succumbed to a curse," in his own blood. Other sources indicate he was tormented by a tragic situation involving a woman infatuated with him who poisoned herself, and that family members disputed whether the curse note was even his handwriting. Digging into old press coverage shows a more complex human story of guilt and despair, not supernatural retribution. The curse line functions more as a dramatic footnote than a factual cause. Sir Archibald Douglas Reed is often listed as the radiologist who x-rayed Tut and died 3 days later. The problem is that the timeline doesn't fit. He died in January 1924 after a medical procedure in Switzerland. The sarcophagus lid wasn't even raised until February 1924, so he could not have x-rayed the mummy. Reed had long-standing health issues related to radiation exposure and radiodermatitis. His inclusion is another example of how names got retrofitted into the curse narrative despite contradicting evidence. Bruce Ingham and a mummified hand. Carter sent his friend Bruce Ingham a paperweight, a mummified hand wearing a bracelet inscribed, "Cursed be he who moves my body. To him shall come fire, water, and pestilence." After receiving it, Ingham's house allegedly burned down when he rebuilt, and a new house allegedly flooded. Perfect story for the balls. Problem is that a few other notable names got folded into the curse: local officials, royalty, or academics who happened to die in Egypt around the same time. Apologies if I butchered this name, but Prince Ali Kamel Hamid Bey was shot in 1923. Sir Lee Stack, Governor General of Sudan, was assassinated in 1924. Their deaths were political and personal, not connected to Tut's tomb, but they still got dragged into the curse list by eager headline writers. One natural explanation is that sealed tombs might contain dangerous molds, bacteria, or chemical residues from decaying food offerings, and organic materials that could cause lung infections when disturbed. Dr. Carolyn Stenger argued that fruit and vegetables placed in the tomb decayed over centuries, becoming mold and then microscopic dust. When the tomb was opened, earlier visitors could have inhaled these particles and developed allergic alveolitis, a severe lung inflammation that can lead to pulmonary failure. It's a plausible mechanism, but allergy specialist Dr. Arthur Meyer points out that it's practically impossible to recreate and test the exact conditions of a millennia sealed tomb. And if there were highly concentrated deadly agents, we'd expect far more cases and deaths than the scattered few often cited. When Carter found the tomb, the Times secured exclusive reporting rights. Other outlets still wanted in, but couldn't get the same direct access. So what do you do when you can't report the raw excavation? You lean into speculation. Curses, omens, mysterious deaths. Lines like, "Tut curse claims another victim." Sell papers even if the victim is someone who died years later of a perfectly mundane illness. Over time, the names and events got lumped together in a narrative where any misfortune remotely connected to Egypt or the excavation was attributed to the curse. This is how you end up with widely repeated stories that don't hold up under scrutiny. Canaries eaten by cobras, letters written in blood, and radiologists who supposedly x-rayed mummies they never had access to. Once an idea catches on, it gets recycled, embellished, and cited until it looks authoritative. So the question is, does the data show a curse? Epidemiologist Mark Nelson published an analysis in the British Medical Journal in 2002, looking at mortality among people associated with the tomb. Adjusting for age and sex, he found no increased risk of early death among those who entered the tomb compared to similar individuals who did not. In other words, statistically, the exposed group did not die sooner than you'd expect. Some died young. Some lived long lives. And when you zoom out, their outcomes look a lot like the general population of the time. Here's the biggest hole in the curse story. If Tut's tomb really carried a deadly curse, the first and most obvious target should have been Howard Carter, the man who found it, opened it, worked in it, and handled the mummy and artifacts extensively. Carter spent a huge amount of time inside the tomb and with Tut's remains. If there were mold or poison or supernatural wrath, you'd expect him to be a primary victim. Instead, he lived until 1939 and died of Hodgkin's lymphoma at 64, 17 years after the discovery. That's a slow, ordinary disease, not cinematic instant death. Lady Evelyn Herbert may have been the first person to physically step into the burial chamber, squeezing through a small hole after Carter opened a peephole. She lived until 1980, dying at 78. She had car accidents and strokes later in life, but nothing that stands out is curse-like beyond the normal wear and tear of human existence. When you realize that the two people most intimately involved lived on for decades, the idea of a targeted, effective curse becomes hard to maintain. Carter himself reportedly called the whole curse notion Tommy Rot. Let's briefly look at a modern Egyptologist, Sahi Hawass, the same one who found that hippo and crocodile warning inscription earlier. He doesn't believe in curses, but he's had some experiences that even he calls strange. Early in his career, he removed a truckload of gold objects and artifacts from the cemetery and transported them to the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. That same day, his cousin died. On the anniversary of that day, the next year, his uncle died. On the same date, the third year, his aunt died. It's unsettling, but even himself chalks it up as a coincidence, not a curse. Later, he excavated a tomb with a warning inscription. They moved mummies of a woman and her children, and then had reoccurring nightmares where they seemed to plead with them. The dream stopped only after he arranged for their father's mummy to be reunited with them. Is that supernatural, psychological, a conscience wrestling with the ethics of moving long dead families around for research and display? Whatever you think, still worlds away from the simple enter tomb, drop dead narrative people love attaching to King Tut. So after digging through the history, inscriptions, medical records, and newspaper embellishments, what are we left with? A mix of normal early 20th century mortality, maybe a bit of mold and dust causing infections in some cases, a huge dose of media sensationalism, human tendency to link unrelated events into neat, spooky stories. There is no solid evidence of a supernatural curse tied to King Tut's tomb. At best, we can speculate that one or two visitors, like George Gould, who died after a serious fever following his visit, might have been unlucky enough to catch something while traveling. But that's a far cry from a pharaoh reaching across the millennia to strangle intruders. Curses and mummies work brilliantly in horror films and theme park rides. They give us stakes. Pull the wrong lever, read the wrong inscription, something immediately terrible happens. In reality, life is messy. People get sick for mundane reasons. Accidents happen, and newspapers need click-worthy headlines. Curse of King Tut is a perfect example of how a few coincidental deaths combined with some evocative ancient warnings and a media frenzy can crystallize into a durable myth. It's compelling, it's atmospheric, just not real. So if you ever find yourself in front of an ancient tomb with a scary inscription, should you go in? Ethically, that's a whole debate about archaeology versus grave robbery. Supernaturally, though, the question is, will an invisible pharaoh zap me? The answer, based on everything we've mentioned, is no. Thanks for watching or listening if you're hearing this as a podcast. If you've enjoyed having your fun spoiled in the name of facts, hit that like button, subscribe, and maybe leave a review. Thank you so much for watching and listening. We'll see you next time.